Howdy everybody, welcome in. We are back once again with the DiscogLog. It has been a long absence for the old DiscogLog here, but we are back, and of course the same usual rules. Remember, this is the show where we listen to all of a band's albums and then we rank them all up against each other. Today we are going to be doing Clutch, the powerful one-word named Kings of Blues and Hard Rock. These guys are one of the greatest rock bands on the planet as far as I'm concerned, and we're going to be ranking all 14 of their studio-length albums. And remember, there are no compilations, there are no live albums on here, and there's not going to be any EPs either on this one, just because most of theirs are pretty short, the ones they have, and they were super early, so we're going to ignore those and just focus on the full-length albums. Let's get into the first one with Transnational Speedway League. Of course, that's not the full name for this album. It's Transnational Speedway League, Anthems, Anecdotes, and Undeniable Truths. The notes here, I got my journal ready to go with a bunch of notes. Album came out in 1993. Producer is John Burnside alongside Steven Hagler helping out with it. This is the band's first album, of course, and it is incredibly raw and it's heavy and it is angry, and especially for the time it came out, this necessarily wasn't a super common thing when you're not, purely into the metal scene. So it was kind of a big deal for that. But it's super groovy album full of lots of funk and groove metal type of things and a few stoner things thrown in there for good measure. Of course, it comes out of the DC underground scene. That's where these guys are from. Neil delivers with, of course, some powerful hardcore styles, scream vocals. And we got heavy and dissonant guitars that sound really cool, and some decent drums. And the unique lyrics seem to pertain to different stereotypes and aspects of the American South, which also explores some of the dark things with the American South and the antebellum legacy that it has. All things considered, as a first album, it's a pretty decent one. I do like it. It is an incredibly raw sound, and it's also a very one-note album. All the songs kind of have the same vibe to them, so it can be a little boring in that sense, but it doesn't feel boring, obviously, because it sounds insane. But where are we going to stick this guy? We got puns here for the rest of these. And I think we're going to stick it in the middle here and put it in passive restraint here. So not anything, not necessarily spectacular, especially from a production standpoint and things like that. But it's a very unique songwriting. It's a very interesting album. All right, next one, let's get to the self-titled here. Jesus on the dashboard, oh yeah. Whenever it feels right. All right, 1995 is when this came out. We got Larry Packer producing on this for these guys, otherwise known as Uncle Punchy, and he does quite a few of the early records with these guys. Again, it's heavy again, like we had before, but we've got more funk and blues ideas in it. Very fun. The vocals are a little bit more varied. It's not the, hardcore go, go, go the entire time. There's some interesting things happening. He's being very dynamic. There's some more layering, still not a lot of that, but they're also experimenting with a lot of sounds, doing really interesting things, spacey kind of sounds, which goes along with the theme of the album. And it's kind of an expansion, sort of, on the ideas from the previous album, because it explores more aspects of life that it started with in Transnational, but we open that up to things like conspiracy, human progress, destruction of the planet, ideas about resilience and things like that. A little bit of a downgrade in production from the first album, which is kind of weird to say. It just feels a little bit smaller, not as cool. So it's a great expansion on their style and has a lot more interesting lyrics, but the production brings it down, so it's going to end up back in the same tier with the first album here. We got to keep it moving because there's 14 of these, so I got to be fast. I can only average like 3 minutes an album. All right, the next one here, we got the Elephant Riders. All right, Elephant Riders, 1998. We got Jack Douglas on this, which I believe was still produced, though, in Larry Packer's studio. So we're not too far from home. I think. I could be wrong about that. Anyway, the guys continue to expand their style. This has a much deeper groove, you know, with some more hard rock riffs and some swampy blues infused with it. But it's a lot more varied, a lot more experimental. They're doing more interesting things with the riffs. Riffs before were kind of simple, and they were very much, you know, doing a lot of power chords and just pushing and pushing stuff through. It's pretty simple stuff, so this is more interesting. More sound experimentation. They're doing lots of different things with sounds and layers, good drum sounds, and better vocal production. It's a very heavy sounding album. Content's not necessarily heavy, but it sounds very thick. It's got some pretty crazy lyrics on it, like alternate history. Of course, the first song, the Elephant Riders, being some alternate history. The Civil War, where they had airships and rode on elephant cavalry. Don't ask. Stuff about death and suffering, voodoo, dangerous women. The song Green Buckets feels like it's about doomsday prepping. I could be wrong, but it's really strange. You know, difficulty of family holidays with Wishbone. And then, you know, Dragonfly kind of feels like a ode to nature and insects. Very interesting kind of thing. Their lyrics can be super hard to figure out and read into because, I mean, Neil is crazy and will write about all sorts of weird things, and he can make really weird songs just about mundane things. Sometimes it's tough to unpack. He's also got more complex vocal styles and melodies than the previous album, so this one is a pretty strong contender here, I would say. What tier are we talking about here? We got tight like that, or 50,000 watts. I didn't put unstoppable watts because it wasn't going to fit right, but let's see. It's clearly an upgrade, but is it in the next echelon is the thing about it. I think because of where we're coming from, I think we are going to stick it right here. I'm going to try to be more variable with how I'm ranking these, because on previous stuff, we don't go below a C on any rankings, but I want to make this more interesting and clear where the albums stack up. So that's going to go right there, logical. All right, let's go to the next one. We are jumping to Jam Room now. Talk when you're singing yourself, but the light grows sweet while adoring yourself. Now with this album, it's not necessarily a complete album, it's sort of an album that's just made up of unreleased material, which is not a compilation album. We aren't counting it like that. We're counting this as original album because these songs really only appeared on here, so it's basically an album still. It feels sort of like an expansion from Elephant Riders. It's not very different. It has a little bit more blues groove in it, you know, but it's pretty raw and simple. The vocals are really not complicated at all. There's some doubles, and that's kind of it for the vocal production, nothing on it. It has a demo quality to it. It has interesting song ideas, but obviously that makes it a little bit disjointed, just because, you know, these songs weren't made to fit together, and it just feels like it's not complete as an album, and that really holds it back. The themes are really weird and all over the place. There's nothing that's particularly coherent about that sound. You know, it makes you feel like it's really not an album. But when you think about it, this was just an extra thing they did, and it only had a European release initially. So it's not one they put a ton of effort into putting together. So we're going to stick it in the subtle no hustle category because there's not a lot going on with it. It's really all over the place and disjointed demo quality. So bleh. Forgot to add, this is 1999 with Larry Packer again. All right, let's go to Pure Rock Fury. How would you like to die on the breaking style? Downtown, they're giving them away. Downtown, they're giving them. How would you like to... So 2001 Pure Rock Fury here with Larry Packer once again reprising his role as producer. Machine also provides a little bit of help on this, as I think he just did engineering. I'm not positive on what they did with that. But anyway, it's their third album with Larry, and it's a very rock-forward record. It's pretty standard for the time that it came out in 2001, with some heavy vocals, but it's got some inconsistent production with weird-sounding guitars that are kind of fuzzy and quiet and a little bit thin. The vocal volume's all over the place. The vocals aren't recorded that well. They don't sound very good. Has some decent moments with the bass and drums, but again, guitars are weird. Feels like a stylistic regression because they didn't get more interesting with this. They got less interesting. And the vocals, again, like I said, they're weird. They don't have enough layers on them. It feels super dry. It's just not a particularly compelling and interesting mix. You don't necessarily enjoy listening to this album. And we got some themes that are interesting, ideas of complacency, you know, trying to make do your best, risk miracles, going through periods of fooling yourself, ignorance, ideas of tampering with nature and how dangerous that is. A religious mercy, but in a sarcastic way, as to say, the fact that you aren't being destroyed by a national disaster is some sick type of mercy. Ideas of having a God complex, and of course, being ready and accepting of death when it finally comes. Interesting themes. Again, doing my best to interpret these. We have no idea what Neil says sometimes. And it's pretty clear what I was going to do with the joke down here. This is going to go at the bottom. It's the worst album. That's pretty much all there is to say with it. Or it really doesn't sound that great. It's an unpleasant record to listen to. It's not that compelling. A lot of the songs really don't feel that good. They feel like they aren't the best ideas they could come up with. Incidentally, I believe this is their last record with Larry, technically speaking. So, yeah, there's a reason why they moved on. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's go to Slow Hold to China. All right, Slow Hold to China came out in 2003. Has Larry as the producer, but that's because all the stuff was recorded with him. And it's another thing of previously unreleased stuff that got put onto here. But unlike Jam Room, much better production. It has good riffs, it has interesting guitar leads. The vocals are properly recorded, have good layering. They aren't just, you know, 2-track vocals that sound kind of bad. They aren't just 2-track vocals that sound weak or anything. So much better. Has a more consistent theme, actually, than the previous album with Jam Room. I'm not really... With these two albums, Jam Room and this one, I didn't really go into detail about themes with it because they're a collection of unreleased songs that weren't necessarily made to go together, although these do go together a lot better. It feels like an actual finished record, and the songs on this sound pretty cool and interesting. Some of the songs are actually better than ones on the self-titled, which makes this honestly a pretty strong album for what it is, which is super weird because it's just random unreleased stuff, but it still sounds pretty good. With that, it's going to go right here next to Elephant Riders. It's not quite as good as Elephant Riders though, but I feel like it's still better than these two just because the quality of the songwriting is pretty good. Now we're getting into the big ones here. It's time for Blast Tyrant. Dream with the feathers of angels stuck beneath your head. The regulator, swinging pendulum. Dream with the So Blast Tyrant 2004, Machine is the producer, which is his professional name. His real name is Gene Freeman. And he's a very excellent producer, and this shows up on this record. It is an obvious upgrade. It's the best thing they've released at this point. Here, this album is magical because of how good it's better production, thicker sounds all around on every instrument. Everything feels really strong and heavy on it, and it's awesome. Drums are great, really thick bass, fat guitars there, and vocals that are recorded much cleaner, much better. I mean, cleaner as in the quality of the vocal recording is much better, which makes them respond to layers and stuff like that even better than previous stuff. Which also have more layers and incredibly diverse vocal delivery from Neil on this, the most diverse that he's had so far. And it's sort of an upgrade that takes all of the earlier stuff and combines it into one powerfully heavy record that contains their things of groove metal, hard rock, blues rock, psychedelic elements. It's got everything. And even adds in a few little folk western kind of elements that keep it really interesting. It has got some of the best and iconic riffs in here that are well put together and aren't really simple like the earlier stuff. So it's got some interesting things going on that will bend your ear to them and make them stick out. Really cool. They're very memorable. The themes on this record seem very consistent. It's got a clear idea of the type of ideas it wants to communicate. Which, of course, if we take a look at the full name of it, so yeah, it's called Blast Tyrant, Atlas of the Invisible World, with illustrations of strange beasts and phantoms. And it does explore that idea pretty well here, because it opens with Mercury, of course, which is the Mercury story. Stuff about greed, humans, war machine, people that manipulate those kinds of situations, you know, mental disorders, longing for rest, defiance, government propaganda, doomsday narcissism, story of a person that has no dignity in death, i.e. they were famous and well known, but it turned out nobody really liked them when they died. And then, of course, the thing about the very last song being about a witch trial. Very interesting thing. And they do kind of tie in to each other a little bit. And some of these do feel, you know, topical for society today and how they explore it. Yeah, it comes around to the, you know, mythical things, and phantoms you can interpret several ways with this, and I still think those fit together in a good way. It's really cool. But anyway, it's just a really great record. It sounds really awesome, really fun to listen to. It's kind of the pinnacle of stuff here. This is the bar right now because it's going at the top, and that is where it's going to sit. So let's go on now to Robot Hive Exodus.
100011 10101 periodic table with a sense of peace of mind. Man, love the job.
All right, Robot Hive Exodus 2005, Jay Robbins producing, and it was made at the Uncle Punchy studio, which is Larry Packer's studio. And despite that, it sounds several times better than any of the records that they did with Larry. And it expands on that more blues and funk driven sound that they were kind of working with on stuff like the self-titled and Elephant Riders. It's going deeper into that blues sound with this. Has the cleanest production so far. Nothing sounds unpleasant or weird or static or fuzzy. Everything sounds great. It's a well-balanced record. Things mix pretty well. Got really strong, catchy riffs on this with some creative lead parts. A lot more lead parts than Tim has had before, and they're all pretty interesting. The drum parts are very interesting, very cool. Vocal delivery, again, very varied, good layers. But the production is very simple and clean. Everything's just recorded nicely, and nothing sounds too overbearing. And it gives it a lot of weight, just putting that forward vocal down like that. It has very good storytelling with some incredibly creative lyrics, more than we have seen from him before, incorporating more of his literature background, because of course Beale's got an English literature degree, and that makes him a very interesting lyric writer. And it has some really interesting stuff with ideas of losing it all to fatalism, to Darwinism, which could be things that go in order of each other, of a person processing those things, futurism, and the pain and dangers that kind of progress can bring. Hard beliefs in science, but also its dystopian possibilities. If you look at the song 100011 10101, I think I got the numbers right, which as far as I know doesn't really mean anything. It's binary in binary code, it's the letter V. I don't know if that means anything. And then, you know, Circus Maximus is kind of like a freak show thing. It's kind of like a freak show of life sort of thing. But I think it's a reference to how celebrities are treated. Because in the song has that tag where he says paparazzi worldwide video debut, indicates that. We have ideas of reformation, and then it kind of ends with showing this background view of the Watchers, which are like things above all of that, bearing witness to all of this. It's a very interesting thing, which references in one of the songs where he says, "For the Watcher never sleeps." And of course, album includes the talents of keyboardist Mick Shower on this, playing organ, and another thing that I forgot the name of, but yeah, he's on here playing a lot of instruments, and he adds a really great sauce to the band and to these songs, and it sounds pretty cool. So for this, what we're going to be doing is, I think we're going to, it's tough because it's a very long album. It does have too many songs, to be frank. is at 14. So it's like, is this on par with Blast Tyrant? Is this a little bit below here in the middle of it? This is a very tough album to rank. Just because of the lyricism and the fact that it's something different, I feel like I do have to put it up here and say it's not as good as Blast Tyrant, but it's really good. All right, let's go to From Beale Street to Oblivion.
Bang, 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 bang. Vamonos, vamonos. Bang, bang, bang. Vamonos, vamonos.
All right, From Beale Street to Oblivion, 2007. Joe Barresi is the producer on this. So we got a new guy here. It's a very groovy, fast-paced blues rocker. It is a pure blues rocker. That's the thing it does well, and that of course makes it one note, like things we've talked about before. It's quite a departure from Blast Tyrant and Robot Hive because it's a downgrade from it. It feels like a logical progression from where they were going to this, but it's a little bit of a downgrade. Vocals sound too quiet, even though the production's done really well for Neil's voice. Again, it's too quiet. Everything's too quiet. I had weird stuff happen when I was listening to this where everything was super quiet for no reason, and I don't know why it's like that or if the album just sounds like that. A lot of the guitars feel rumbly and fuzzy and not particularly well defined at all, so they're not great to listen to, especially on single notes. It just sounds like it's not beefy enough. The wrong frequencies are sticking out. The riffs aren't as defined as the previous two records. It's kind of more about the blues groove on it. So a lot of stuff is very much repeating. It's not particularly melodic, very pentatonic forward. And the mixing is inconsistent because some songs are louder than others and different instruments are louder on different songs, and it's really weird. Mick is doing a lot more on this album with his organ playing and things like that, which adds a great angle to this album, and it sounds really good. Also, there's some harmonica on it in spots, and it sounds really good, so I do like that. It does have some consistent themes. It kind of tells a progressing story throughout the album, which is pretty good. Opening with stuff like life and death, liars and dangerous people, the toil and pain of humanity and existing, corruption and revolution, and it kind of goes down in order, so it's pretty well sequenced of an album from that respect. But I listed the problems with it. I don't enjoy listening to this album very much, despite it having their most popular song on it, Electric Worry. I don't know how that happened, that's their most popular song, because I don't think it's nearly close to the best song that they've done, but it's fine. Because of that, I'm actually going to put it down here with Jam Room, just because I just don't like it very much. You know, there's not really anything else to say. Some of that's probably a preference thing, but from what they've shown they can do with the albums, two albums before that, it's really not inspiring. Strange Cousins from the West next up.
The city's always begging, hungry fellows of the Minotaur. Every day more.
All right, Strange Cousins from the West, 2009. Jay Robbins has returned for production on this, although I do not remember if it was recorded in Uncle Punchy's studio. I don't think it was. But again, we're going back to Jay from Robot Hive, so the production, again, upgraded from the previous effort. Guitars and vocals, proper volume. Everything is properly mixed. The production's much cleaner. The guitars sound way better. Drums are very punchy. And this album has really great groove, and the riffs are very tight together. And they're a little bit more interesting, not basic pentatonic blues stuff. Tim does even more lead experimentation, and it sounds really good on this. He's very creative with what he does, but he typically is. It's a little bit heavier than Beale, which we like from Clutch. They're good when they're heavier. This is a pretty fun album to listen to because of how groovy it is front to back. And we got themes of abandonment, women's wrath. There's a couple songs dealing with that. Activities of the government, specifically with 50,000 unstoppable watts. And of course, the evil of men and hidden forces that control things behind the scenes. Pollution and end times. And the insatiable greed, and then the song ends with a song that sounds like it's about a conspiracy theorist. Very fun kind of ideas, and it's called Strange Cousins from the West. So we're dealing with strange and misunderstood and maybe dangerous people throughout the record. That's kind of the overarching theme on it. Okay, because of what we've done previously with these guys here, and how this sounds better than those two, we're obviously going to be dropping it in the 50,000 Unstoppable Watts category, which we should because, you know, that's on the album. So drop it in the same tier that's named for the song. Okay, let's go to Earth Rocker now. All right, Earth Rocker 2013 Machine is back once again. Our favorite fantastic producer that worked on Blast Tyrant. Of course, he returns in all of his mighty power. And this time, may the band focus on pre-production and getting everything done and ready, getting all the songs basically written before they went in, so they can have a clear, concise record that they can hit really hard on, play from the heart, not have to worry about jamming things through, which can slow down the process and make songs too disjointed and windy. So it's a lot more put together, parts are well crafted, and it taps into the heaviness and the guitar style that we heard on Blast Tyrant and had not heard since then up until this point, almost 9 years after. And this captures the best sounds the band members all have to offer. I think it actually does that sometimes in better ways than Blast Tyrant. It has some big guitars rich in your face, vocals, powerful drums, attacking and punchy bass, more lead guitar on this one. This album is very interesting in that they organized it like two clear sides of a record, side one, side two, and they both sides kind of have a separate theme to them. You could consider the song that's dead in the middle of these 11 tracks to sort of be a bridge or a turning point type of thing. Very interesting. Side one kind of deals with this fighter type person who could be a liar and a thief. And then we jump to someone who kind of embodies these qualities, but as a political charlatan, you know, posing as a savior type figure, which goes into state propaganda manipulation and the fallout of all of that to Gone Cold, which is kind of a song about dissociating or something like that. That is the turning point. Of course, side two, we have ideas of awakening, revenge, lost relationships, and trials and difficulties of men's hearts. So the first one focuses on like a specific type of person and how dangerous and what that can lead to if they're, you know, powerful. And side two is just kind of a guy that's going through some stuff, bro. A guy that's struggling, he's going through it, man. Really tough for him. This album is pretty nice, pretty good, pretty cool. I like it a lot. Now, is it enough of a departure? It's kind of heavy Strange Cousins from the West. So I don't know if we can drop it on top of these guys here. It may not quite be there. The production really is there on this record, though. But I want to leave a little bit more room for stuff to be interesting here. So we're going to put that there. All right, let's go on to Psychic Warfare next. All right, Psychic Warfare 2015, Machine once again, of course, he's back. Got to keep him around. This was recorded at a studio at the time he had just built, which is incidentally not that far from where I am. My top note is that Machine is the clutch whisperer because he just tends to bring out the best in these guys and knows how to use their sounds to their full effectiveness. Same great production again, very diverse vocal production that hasn't been this diverse before. We really do like that. The guitars are very bright, very attacking. It's a new kind of sound they're working on that accentuates the heavy blues and western focus of this record. And it sounds really great in this context. And it's got that blues sound, but they have very dynamic changes. The pacing of the record's very dynamic. The songs are not one note at all, very evolving, and it's still heavy. Even with this different kind of guitar sound, it's heavy in a different way. And it's very thick mix too. It sounds really fat. And there's even more some odd experimentation of different effects and things like that. But what really brings it together for this album with these guys is the conceptual nature of it. At the end of the day, this is a concept album, basically, which they didn't really do prior to this point. This is the first time they've really done a overarching concept album. which kind of has a very strong focus on like science fiction. And Neil said he was inspired by author Philip K. Dick when writing a lot of the songs on here. Basically, the theme, here you go, here's the best way to distill it that I said is guy who's seen some shit recounting the events that happened to him. Those events being from things of different concepts of science fiction, femme fatales he's made on the way, bad choices he's made, and then the fun song here, Decapitation Blues, which is actually about Neil Fallon having 2 herniated discs at the time and getting that fixed so they could continue touring because they had to briefly put stuff on hold while he was dealing with that. I said Coming Back from the Dead, which, oops, I mean, it sounds like that, but that's not what it is. Anyway, ignoring that one, and then the end of the song, making a grand life-changing discovery. So this guy goes through all this stuff, and he's recounting it to a police officer or something because it opens with the affidavit, which is a little 25-second thing at the top that establishes our story here. Then he ends it with that at the end of his statement, and that's pretty much it. It was really interesting concept there. Obviously, like, there's a couple of songs that don't necessarily follow the concept that were just put in there because they were good songs, but in ways they do still, just from the lyrical content, could be interpreted in that way. Again, very great, very effective album. Machine is on his game with this one. I really do like the Machine's production with them. It's always really good. Top of the pile here. Stick it in the top because it has the majesty equal to Neil's beard that he currently has. All right, before we move on here, I think I'm going to actually drop Jam Room down. All right, let's go on to the next one here. Book of Bad Decisions.
The start, Defcon, trap beams, give a ray gun, straight out the mothership, weaponized funk.
Anyway, Book of Bad Decisions 2018 got a different guy on this named Vance Powell, who has worked with a lot of country artists, incidentally, which made me kind of not like the choice with this because I don't know if he's going to capture the heaviness as well. And of course, it is a well-made record because they got a very good producer on this, but it feels a bit inconsistent. Their ideas are kind of jumping all over the place. It repeats a lot of parts, which I don't necessarily like. It doesn't feel as concise. The album's also got 15 songs on it. It's the longest one that they did, which does not make sense from where we were coming from prior to this. You'd think it'd be way more concise, but it kind of makes it feel like it's a mess, which makes it a big letdown when we're coming off Psychic Warfare. You know, not very good. It feels kind of dated. It feels like something they could have done earlier, though, but they're doing it now because it is incredibly blues forward in a way that's very different from Psychic Warfare because everything kind of has the same kind of blues sound. And some of the themes are particularly interesting, but it's kind of just all over the place. I don't really have anything to say about the production because it is pretty good on here. And like Tim is doing some cool lead guitar ideas that I do like on it. But it feels like our themes are jumping around all over the place, and it feels like in a way that the songs on this album weren't necessarily meant to go together. Some of them feel like they could have been on something completely different and had a better theming that way. They could have sequenced it better to sort of accommodate for the lack of direction that the songs have with not going together as well, but it is what it is. There's not any delineation in the story between what kind of story are we telling, or do these go together, are these different? They're just kind of thrown together, which the themes that do exist there are commentary on the USA, science fiction, mysticism, historical figures, thinking about the past and Southern traditions, regret, those kinds of things, but everything else is kind of just thrown together. Again, like I said before, it's too long. It could have been trimmed down to 12 songs at least. It could have even gotten it to 11 if they wanted to push it, but I think 12 would have been the number just based on the songs that I would cut from it. Because of that, it's going to actually go below the first 2 albums, which is kind of wild to say considering the production is orders of magnitude better than obviously these albums down here. Like the production is on par with like Earth Rocker, but you know, the material is just not there on this album. Let's get to Sunrise on Slaughter Beach.
Economic casualties, my blue
All right, we are all caught up here. Sunrise on Slaughter Beach 2022 with producer Tom Dougherty. I'm not sure how to say his name, but has worked with some interesting bands, including Ghost, which is a really interesting choice for the band to make because they are picking a guy that is experienced with heavy music, but has worked with some really interesting and weird bands. And that does show up on this because the material they've written is the most unique stuff they've done probably since Blast Tyrant. So, and that's a big compliment, you know. It's got these really wide kind of melodic riffs. It's a much different approach for Tim and his guitar part writing, instead of relying on, you know, regular riffage that's very kind of pentatonic driven and very bluesy. This does something very different, very melodic and psychedelic kind of sounding, which is a different direction for the band. It does have very powerful attacking forward vocals that sound really crisp on here. Very cool. There's not a ton of crazy layering or lots of reverbs or anything like that, although chorus does get used on his voice on the song Nosferatu Madre, which is the first time we really heard chorus on his voice, which is a cool addition. In some of the songs, they have a guest female vocalist for some of the harmonies, and she's very good, does some very interesting stuff, and it fits super well on this album. Drum mix sounds really great on here. The bass has very active parts, and I mean by that, he's not just following along or playing anything basic. These are like crafted bass parts that sound very interesting. Again, and this album uses a lot of odd and ambient sounds and experimentation they haven't done before, which is why the selection of their producer was important for this, because he knows how to make that work well. And this album is incredibly refreshing, considering a lot of the albums between, you know, Blast Tyrant to this one is a very blues focus. This completely throws that out the window and does something new with them. It's a tight album. It's very concise because it is only 9 songs. It's barely 30 minutes. So you can get through it quick, and what a 30 minutes with all that's happening on this record. Anyway, it's got an interesting theme that is pretty consistent on the record. Of course, the main theme you see is these weird alien people riding on flying horseshoe crabs. That's the theme of the album art, which adds to some very interesting commentary about science fiction and nature on this album, which we have like dangerous technologies and the abuses of them, stripping natural resources, in which the song Slaughter Beach is about what early, you know, American colonists did with the horseshoe crab populations up in the New England area. They got decimated completely because the crabs were frequently killed because they thought their blue colored blood was really interesting, I think was the main thing, and it was a weird type of thing. I guess they were trading the blood or using it for something or medicine. I don't know. It was a weird situation. And then experiencing a difficult long journey, witchcraft, mysterious figures. Ooh. I think it might actually be a song about a ghost, which Mercy Brown is the one that sort of references that. And then strive for excellence. Pretty obvious what that is. Weird future on Mars and what could be lying beneath the sands out there. Very interesting song. Skeletons on Mars is probably the best song on this record. And then the commentary about jazz from Three Golden Horns and how it corrupts the youth, I think is a general theme about change, just in general, and how change comes and people always resist it in the same ways. And then all those things happen and everything eventually just fades. Jackhammer Our Names is kind of like that, about some guys that were some conquerors and were at the height of power and were loved by everyone, and eventually over time all of that fades away and they're completely forgotten. So it's a very interesting kind of amalgamated theme in a way, because you'd think maybe those things don't make sense together or fit, but they actually do because of how it sort of ties in at the end of the album. But anyway, at the end of the day, this is a super interesting album that's way different from anything they've done. And despite that, they execute it super well, and it sounds really good. So again, top of the pile here for Sunrise on Slaughter Beach. All right, guys, that is going to do it there. All 14 Clutch albums ranked here nicely for you guys. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video ranking these albums. Clutch is one of my favorite bands. Love these guys. Don't forget to leave a comment down below. Tell me what you like about Clutch. Maybe drop your favorite album down below and what you think of the tier list. Don't forget to click the bell so you know when a new video is out on the channel, and I'll see you guys next time in another one. Have a good one.